This is the era of business intelligence analytics, and Power BI is leading that. You want to learn Power BI? This is the channel for you. Beginner series 200 plus videos, advanced series 100 plus videos, and if you are absolute beginner, don't know anything in Power BI, then start with 4 live videos. Subscribe to the channel. Hello and welcome to another video on beginner tutorial series, and in today's video we are going to discuss one Power Query function, and the function is Table.Pivot. Now you might have done the pivot table code in Power Query many times. Like you go and do it for menu. Now what we are going to do is we are going to do this pivot table code manually today using this Table.Pivot function. Now in the Table.Pivot function, the argument which it takes is table, pivot values, uh, then the attribute column as text, value column as text, and optional aggregate table function. Okay, so these are the argument and it returns a table. Now so example has been given. So if you have a table table.pivot code, then you have table from records. That's basically a table, nothing but a table. And then we have this a, b, and c, and these are the distinct values, and I'll discuss, because right now we are able to see there are 3 distinct values and we can see, okay, this. Then you remember we have a column, 2 columns, attribute columns and value columns. So these are the attribute column name and the value column name. So this is how these column names are coming. So we will try to see what does it gives us and can we rename that, and then we do it. And this is the first example. In the second example, actually we have used a function max also. Okay, so in the first example we did not use it, and in the second example we have used it. Okay, so in the first example you see we have value like a, b, a and b. Okay, and then we got 2 rows, a1 to b2, x and y, and then in the second example we have more than one value, so we use the, let's say, max value. So we will look at this example and then we will do little bit of play around, and we have our own code which we were using for pivot. So we'll bring that in also, a table. We have our table which we'll bring in and try to see how can we manage this stuff better. So let's jump out of the Power BI. I already opened my Power BI, and in Power BI, if you wanted to go to Power Query, the way to go is home, transform data, which will take you to the Power Query. Now in Power Query, what I'm going to do is, first of all, let's bring in some code and try that out. Okay, so first of all, let's create a new blank query. So home, new source, blank query. Once you click on that, at the end it is going to add, and I can double click or right click. So look at the bottom of the screen, on the left hand side. So query 9 it is giving, and let me call it pivot 1 or pivot 1. Okay, and let me go and copy the code from the here, and let me do this. So let me create this table and do it, and then later we will also bring our own data. So I say advanced editor. First let me show you what data it has, and then we'll start our play around. I've taken directly the second code. Okay, so it has the key column, the attribute column, and what happens typically, the attribute and the value are, these are the columns which we take, and based on these columns, these could be any column actually, basically. So we are calling this as attribute and value, but these could be any 2 columns which we are taking in, and based on that we can do that. And so let's go ahead and advanced editor. Now let's execute the function, the pivot function. So we say underscore pivot, table.pivot, and first argument is the table name, so we give the source, and I'm going to give a comma in a line before. That's important. Now second one is the, what is the second argument? Let's look at it. The second argument is the list of the values. So we need to give in the double quotes a, and we have a comma b comma c. Then after that we need to give the attribute column name, and here the attribute column name is attribute. If we have a different column name, we should be able to take a different column name. We will try out with a different set of columns, and the value column name. First let's try with this. Okay, and we are not giving the function. You remember with this data, sample data, they have used a function, but we are trying without a function. Why it is not doing anything for us? Because if I add a new step, I need to return a new step, and that is the thing which, which happens if you do manual coding. You have to make sure that if you are adding a step, you need to return it in the. Now you can see it's giving error. Why it is giving error? Because there wasn't enough element to enumerate the complete operation. Because if you remember here, there are two values which is applicable, and that is why they have used the final function max. Because if you don't have, then you can't take distinct values here. So that's why we have used here basically. And I'll tell you one thing. Let me remove this one set of values from here. First, let me show you this. Now you are able to see go here and look at the table. Now this table doesn't have that additional row. So you are able to do a pivoting and you are able to get down. Now when you have more than one value and now you know that it's going to give me error. So then it needs a function. Now what function it needs? It needs a function which can actually aggregate those things. Okay. So we can give list dot sum max min. Let's give list dot sum. Try out something differently what has been given. So you now we get 8. So 5 and 3 8. But remember, there is no two options we have in this same column. We are not able to take multiple decisions. Only one decision we can take at a time. So it's not for A, it's going to take different decision. For B, it can take different decision. C, it can take a different decision. It's not going to happen. Now, so let me do one thing. Let me bring in a little bit different. Let me go to the advanced editor, copy this code, and I'll tell you now a little bit different thing. Okay. So I go to the new home new blank query. I create one more query and let me call it pivot 2. I entered it. So right click rename or double click rename, both. Now it's the same code, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to make these values are also, let's say, Amit, Sumit, Ajay, Vijay, let's say Bob. Okay. Now list.sum cannot work. Okay. We know that list.sum is not going to work because it's a text value. So if you go and do this operation, you see error. List.sum cannot work. So we go to the, and here instead of going if the step is visible, I can say list.max, isn't it? That's fine. Now, can't I get a concatenated text? Isn't it a good question? We have two names, isn't it? So here we have Sumit and Ajay. I get one name. Can't I get concatenated? So I have a function which is basically text dot combine. It needs two arguments, remember. So first of all, without any argument, I give it. So what's happening, if you see when I give text dot combine, there is no space I can give. I'm able to combine values, but I can't give a second argument. There's no place if I give function like this to give the second argument. It's taking the default argument, which is not having anything, which is just concatenated. So what I'm going to do is, because it said you can give a function, so let me try out each text dot combine underscore comma, and let's give our own separator here, and let's see what happens. Now you can see. So XA is Amit. Let's find X and A was Amit, Y and A was Vijay, and XC were two Sumit and Ajay, you got it, and YB was Bob, you got it. Okay, so we are able to do that. So now, but I'll bring my data and you should have this question that, do we know these values every time? Are we going to hard code these values? Now I want to do some coding. I need to look into my data and what happens if the data doesn't have these values. Is it the only way we can get it? So that could be one question which is there in our mind. But let's bring in some new data, and I go to the new source Excel, and pivot data, if you remember, is our sheet which we have on the GitHub, which we are using for many of my videos. And in that, we have this pivot data which is already pivoted, and we have this unpivoted data. So you see this is major, month, major, and value. So this is the one which typically I say, okay, we'll go ahead and pivot this. Okay, so now let's bring in this. So now you have this. Now you know what need to be done. You go to advanced editor and you have all these steps. Now see, all these steps have been added. Now we go at the end, comma, underscore pivot, table.pivot. Now what's my table name? The last step table name. Always remember, hash this one. Now I don't want to look into I know there are two values, sales and margin, but I don't want to look. Then I can do. Remember, a table column name is a list, and list dot distinct can give me a list of the names from a table. So table name is compulsory. Remember the table name. What was the second table column name? So we need to know what is the second column name, major. Okay. And here you can see this name is here. Okay. Now what is the column which are participating? Now we don't have attribute and value. So attribute, what is my attribute column? I think major is my attribute column, isn't it? And what is my value column? My value column is my value column. And let me return the pivot. Return pivot. Done. Okay. Error again because I have two value on that particular day. So that's the same error when you say, and if you remember, that's the option, distinct option. So when you use that distinct option, it's going to come. Now here it is not a text value, so it's a numeric value. So only I can do a numeric operation. Only one operation I can do. So I can say list dot max or list dot sum. The way I got the values is list dot sum, and margin is not percentage here. Margin is a value here. So I got the sum. So now you see this error has gone. So this is the same thing. If you remember, whenever I was teaching the pivot table pivot operation, where from we have this operations available in transform, and for your reference, let me do one thing. Let me do the same operation using the this one. So let me bring in this workbook again. I'm going to do the same operation from menu which we have done by ourselves. Now you know we can play around. Even if Power BI does it, we can do little bit of play around. There's no harm in doing that. So it's going to make a new table with a 2 now because we already done it. So what we used to do, we used to select these columns, 2 columns, and we used to go to transform data, pivot column, and then the value column name it used to ask, and what is the aggregation. So don't aggregate is the by default one which was executing, but we want a sum. So we do sum, and the same result is coming. And you can say almost the similar kind of stuff has happened. See, list dot distinct. Because you are not going to remember the name or values which is there. So we have to use the list operation to do that. And every column is a list. Table name, column name. The way if you give in that manner, then it's a list. So go ahead and try these things out, and do let me know what else you want me to cover in this particular series. Thanks for watching this video. Thank you. Keep watching, keep asking questions in comments, subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon so that you can get notification for new videos. Thank you.